So the next thing that we're going to do might seem a little bit scary, but it's going to be okay. All right, so what are we doing here? Well, I started creating these training programs for my employees as I grow my company from $0 to $100,000 a year. I decided I may as well share the knowledge with you as well here for free. If you want to skip ahead of the line, I would invite you to take the best real estate photography business course I've ever seen. It's called Real Estate Photography Pro. It was created by Eli Jones. He's years ahead of me in his business, and he has put together the most complete business course and community. You can find a link for more information on the course in the video description. And if you join, I'll see you in the private Facebook group. Of course, if you're not in a hurry and you want to keep learning for free, just tap that. I think it's on this side. Just tap that subscribe button and keep watching here. Now let's get back into the edit. All right, we are back in the studio and we are going to do a full edit on the photos that we just took. So I have them open here in a folder. I have two monitors on this screen, so if it looks like I'm looking around a lot, I'm switching between monitors, trying to make sure that you get to see everything that you need to see. So I open up this folder called Real Estate. I'm going to create a new folder. It is 823 View Street. You can just abbreviate that. Hagerstown, Maryland. There we go. Now I'll open that folder up. I'm going to come over here, DCIM. I'm just going to drag that whole folder over and move it. That's going to clear my memory card, but at the same time, it's also going to make sure that all of the images are in here and that this name is used, this folder name. If I was going to use the drone, then the drone folder starts with 100, and the Atomos, I put in an Atomos folder, so I keep everything organized that way. Let's show you another folder here. So we have the 100 media, that's from the drone. This comes in from, if I have a video edited from an editing company, we'll talk about that later. And this is from the Z6. So back to View Street. We have all of our images in here now. I can close this other file. I am going to take this right now and put it back in my camera, so when I go to do another photo shoot, I know that my card is in my camera. There's a reason I'm saying that. It's happened before. All right, transition back to the screen. Now, I don't really need this open anymore. What I need to open, if you can see it down, oh, it's not on this screen at all. Minimize this. I hid all my tabs from you so you wouldn't judge me on all the tabs that I have open. We're going to open Photomatix. And Photomatix looks like this. So, silly me. We're not ready for Photomatix yet. We're gonna, okay. So the next thing we need to open after we have brought all of the images in over here is Lightroom Classic. Lightroom is going to open up on this monitor, so I am going to let it finish opening and then drag it over here so you can see what's going on. All right, we are going to import these images. I clicked import. And right now it's on Windows C, but I need to go to Volume D because that's where my real estate folder is. And we're going to choose 823 View Street, drop that down. You'll see our Z6 folder here. We can go ahead and bring in all of these images. The develop setting, I'm going to set to none. I'm going to tell you something. User presets, I used to have a preset for F14 that would apply camera corrections, but we don't need to do that, and I'll show you why in a second. So I'm going to click none. I'm going to import these images. And now we have all of the images from that camera, from our shoot this morning, and we'll import those in a second. I'm going to come over here to develop just to show you why we don't need to use those image corrections. Now what we would normally do is we would enable profile corrections and then sync them across all of the images so that if there was any lens corrections that needed to be applied, then they would go on all of the images. But if you look down here, it says built-in lens profile applied. The newer cameras have a lens profile that's already built in. If I click on that, it says Nikon Z6 14 to 30 millimeter. This raw file contains a built-in lens profile correcting distortion and chromatic aberration. This profile has already been applied automatically to this image. Okay, so that's why we don't need to apply profile corrections here, and why I wouldn't do it as I'm importing them. I used to do it, and I created my own profile correction for it, and then realized in learning how all of this works that that was not necessary. So I've taken it off. We bring it in with the original file, and then we now have to export these. The reason we have to export these is because we are going to use Photomatix to process these photos. And I want to separate the interiors from the exteriors. Now what happens is I already have exterior photos on my desktop from my last photo shoot. So I'm going to hit Control A and make sure those are cleared, because we're going to move some new images into here. Same with the interior. I'll hit Control A and delete, and we'll get rid of those images. Now I can minimize that. I'm going to find all of my interior images, hit Shift and click, and that's going to highlight all of those. Come up to the top left corner where it says File. I'm going to go down to Export. That brings up this window. Now you can see this was the last photo shoot we did, and it's in final. We're not ready for final yet. We're not going to deliver these images like this. We need to process them in Photomatix first. So I'm going to click Photomatix. I'm going to choose these as interior. I'm going to write my address here. This is how I keep track of everything. 182 View Street Interior. And then it's going to number all of these images by number 1 to number, looks like 69. So if I export those, you'll see up here in the top left corner, it's now exporting 69 files. I can also go through and grab number 70, go down to the end, hit Shift and click and highlight all of those. File, Export, and we're going to move this into the exterior folder. So I'll type exterior in there, and I will change this name to exterior as well, and hit export. And you can now see there are 2 operations in progress in that top left corner. Depending on the speed of your computer, you may or may not want to do 2 operations at the same time. I have a lot of RAM in this computer. It generally tends to be pretty fast, but Lightroom is slow for everything. And when we're recording the screen at the same time, it slows everything down as well. So the computer's struggling right now to make sure that it can get these 2 operations done. If you have a slower computer, it's going to struggle even more. And I have 32 gigs of RAM, I think, in this computer. So the internals run pretty quickly, but it still takes a while to run this process. So all right, and I just paused the recording for a minute to give the computer a chance to catch up. It's almost finished exporting the second batch of files. So the next thing that we're going to do might seem a little bit scary, but it's going to be okay. As soon as this is finished exporting those, we're going to come over here And it doesn't matter which one we click on. We're going to hit Control A, choose all of the images, and then hit delete. And that's not going to delete all of the folders, all of the files from the folder. It's just going to remove from Lightroom. If I hit delete from disk, then it would erase all of the images. We don't want to do that. We're just going to remove from Lightroom. Hit that, clear everything out, turn Lightroom off, and we're going to start Photomatix and start the process. So now Photomatix is open. I'm going to choose Batch Bracketed Photos. That brings up this window, and you can see it's already got the exteriors loaded for View Street, and it's already got my presets here. If we wanted to look at the presets, I've got exterior and interior here. We're on exterior. I will include these presets in the description or downloads area below and make sure that you have access to those. The other thing that we need to look at here is that we have merged 3 images at a time. If we were doing aerials, we use 5 images. So I would need to open that up and change this to 5. All of the other settings you can see here. Contrast is none, sharpening is none. We're going to do all of that within Lightroom. So I'm just going to let that run. It runs through the process and it creates what's called a Tif file for these images as it compresses the 3 images into one and gives us the final HDR image. So we'll let that run for a moment. I will again pause this and let that work its way through. We're now finished processing the images for the exteriors to HDR. So all I have to do is come up to Select Folder. I'm going to click the interior folder and hit OK. Now if you see, this exterior folder now has a drop down caret. It's because there's a Photomatix results. That's where all of our merged images are for the exteriors. We're going to create the same thing now for the interior. Come over here and change our preset to interior and run. Let that run through and then we'll move all of this back over to Lightroom. All right, so that just finished up and that didn't really take very long, just 2 rounds of Candy Crush. And we've got all of these results done. So you can see the interior results are completed here. This is telling you the folder that it's in, and the exterior results are way up here. So we can close that. No more need for the Photomatix to be open. Just close it down and open Lightroom Classic again. Now this time we are going to go to the C drive when we import these images. So I'll hit import. And it's kind of crazy because it doesn't let you favorite a drive. So I have to go find this drive every time. So I'll come up here to where it says Windows C, drop that down, go to Users, drop that down. Go to the name of the computer, drop that down, go to Desktop, there it is, drop that down. And now we're looking at exteriors and interiors. I like to do exteriors first, hit Photomatix Results, and it brings up our exterior images. Now the other thing is we're going to go to Develop Settings, and this time we are going to use a user preset, and that's our exterior import. Put that on there, and that makes sure that we have all of the settings that we want applied to the Develop module. So I'll hit Control A so that all of those are chosen. Move over to Develop, and we started in the back of the house, if you remember. So this is the back side of the house, and these are the changes that were made. Contrast was brought up 15, highlights were brought down 29, shadows were brought up 40, whites just 0.3. Blacks none, texture and clarity are at 0, dehaze is at 70. Watch this sky as I bring that dehaze down. This is what happens, we lose that sky. But now there's this nifty little trick that you can do in Lightroom that wasn't available when I created this preset. So if I just come up here to where masking is and click on that, I can select the sky. Give that just a second to figure out where the sky is at. There it is. And now I can go in and I can dehaze just the sky, and I can bring that look back. In fact, I can increase clarity now. I can change the texture. I can bring up my highlights to make sure the clouds are as white as I like them to be. I can increase or decrease the contrast. Whatever you want to do to that sky, you can now do it without affecting the rest of the image. The issue with that is you cannot sync it to the rest of the images because the shape of the sky is not the same. So the mask would not be the same for any of those images. Neither here nor there. The way that this preset was created was that it would hit that dehaze and dehaze the entire picture. So if I go down here, I want to make sure, I don't always choose vertical, but I'm going to make sure my verticals are correct. If that looks good, I'll leave it. If it doesn't look good, I'll choose auto instead. You can see that there's a little minor adjustment there, but it really depends on your preference. I like the vertical for this, so I'm going to leave it. We'll go to this next one. Same thing, hit verticals. That looks a little off, actually. So I like to hover over this so I can see my grid lines and if they're lined up properly. And when I look up here in this area, it does not look as though it's lined up. So I'll hit auto instead, and that actually lined it up better. So in that case, I would leave it on auto. There are other ways to do it. That's getting deeper into editing than we are going to get in this episode. So let's go over here. Now, this is the front of the house, and I was talking about how the post was in the way. This would be okay because the MLS cannot read what's on that sign. I don't know why that didn't expand for me. It should be zooming in. Anyhow, it cannot see what's on that sign. So you could leave it like this, or you could edit this to take the signpost out, whichever you prefer. But what I was concerned about is when we hit verticals on this, the top of this roof is going to get obliterated. It's still within view, so I'm okay with that. Maybe change the horizontal a little bit so that it's lined up just right. And then you can see that brought some white edges in, so I'll hit constrain crop, and it should take that white edge out. There it is. Perfect. All right, I like it like that. I cannot see the street, just the curb, the ring of grass. Everything is nice and straight here. This is nice and square here. I'm happy with that. I can see the top. It's not cut off by the top of the frame. Again, for my angles, we were a little concerned about this. You can definitely read that sign here. So I'm going to hit my vertical. I'm going to hit constrain crop. And it worked out pretty well. It actually brought it down instead of losing the rooftop. So I'll show you in a second what we're going to do to remove that sign. Come over here to the last image, hit vertical, hit constrain crop. It's not beautiful. What if I do auto instead? Check out my crop on that. Can I get any more roof line out of that? I lost a lot here. Move this back. So when I hit, crop that. When I hit vertical, it created that super huge white space down here. Take that constrain crop off like that. And so when I hit constrain crop, it had to crop way in to get rid of that. When I went to auto, it kind of got rid of that. Now everything is not straight, but I don't have those huge lines either. So I wasn't going to get into this, but we also have guided, which is we can come over here and we can find our verticals this way by finding a nice spot on the house that's easily recognizable that we know is straight. Draw a straight line down there. And then find another spot over here on the house that we know is straight. Let's take this outside edge because it's got that nice dark line on it. If I can get closer. It's jumping all over the place. I'm doing this with a mouse. Get one spot. Oh, there it is. That's where it would be straight. Let go. And that is perfectly straight. Even straighter than it did with the auto, right? But as you can see, these huge white bars are just going to be too much. It's going to crop in way too far. So let's go back to auto. Let's go back to crop. Let's bring our image back into view. And we're just not going to have perfectly straight verticals on this image. We're not going to be able to do it because we can't show off enough of the house. So I'm pretty happy with the rest of these, the way they turned out. And we're going to work on this sign. So to fix this sign issue, we are going to edit in Adobe Photoshop. That brings up this window. It says edit a copy with Lightroom adjustments. That's what we want. So we'll hit edit. It's going to open up Photoshop for us. It takes just a little bit of time and everything moves a little bit slower when we're recording. So Photoshop is open. I'll get over here as soon as it lets me drag. There we go. Kind of half in, half out there. Maximize that. Now we have our image here and we have this sign, which is a problem. So I'm going to make sure that this layer is selected. I'm going to hit Control J and that gives me a duplicate layer. I'm going to zoom in as far as I can, and now you can see that my select is the zoom key. I could change it to the hand, or I can just hit the space bar and it changes it to the hand automatically, and I can drag it over here where I want it. There's a lot of ways that we can attack this to try and get rid of this sign. The quickest and easiest way is usually to come over here and grab the spot healing brush tool. And if you see down here, it also says J. So if I'm over here and I hit J, it automatically switches me to the spot healing brush tool. And I've got this sized right now that's just a little bit wider than that post. If I hit the left bracket, it makes the size smaller. If I hit the right bracket, it makes it sized larger. If it's just a little bit bigger than the post, and I click and just drag down and cover that post with this shadow that it's creating, and just make sure all that white is chosen and covered, and then let go, it fixes all of that pretty well. There's a little bit of a bump right there. See, that made it worse. I'll hit Control Z and take that back out. If I just bring this down smaller and just focus on that bump, it might fix that. And sometimes it takes a couple of clicks. That looks much better. So now we have the top half of this to deal with. And if we continue with this Control J, it might do some funny things. So I'm going to just draw over the sign here. And let's see what this does. Boom. It's not too bad. The problem is that the house behind it has a window here, and we don't really know what that window looks like, but it probably looks a lot like this window up here. So maybe instead of trying to spot healing brush this, we're going to choose another tool. Right now, I'm going to try the entire sign post and see what we can get rid of this way. That worked really well, so I'm happy with that. All I've got is this sign, and actually the sign is the most important part to get rid of. Draw over it again. That's even better. That's not bad at all, because I've got the drain post coming down here, and I did a couple more clicks and it just carried it right through. That looks really good. And then all I have to do is fix this area where our window is missing. So I'm going to come over here to where our clone stamp tool is, or if you look over here, the key for that is S. So if I just come over here and hit S, it gives me the clone stamp tool. It looks a lot like that spot healing brush, right? See how it just changed sizes? But there's a huge difference between these two tools. And one of those differences is when you're on the clone stamp tool, you have to choose where you're going to start. And I am going to start on this top left corner of this window, and I'll hit Alt. That sets my target, and then I'll left click, and my target is now on that window. If you can see, that window looks identical to this window. So if I just kind of set this in place where that window is, that looks pretty close right there. I'm going to left click and start drawing. And you can see it's cloning, that's why it's called the clone stamp tool, that area above down onto our window. And we can fill that in. If I come up just a little bit, the problem is that it's so close to the roof up here, and this shadow is so dark that this does not look very realistic. The rest of this looks really good. So I'm going to choose another area, and that's this vinyl siding here, and I'll bring that down to where the lines match up with this other vinyl siding, and that lets me just kind of paint in here and fix that up. Now if it's, oh, I went a little too far, did you see that? Take that away. This is why sometimes it's better to do this in different clicks. Control Z is what allows you to back up in history, but sometimes it's too aggressive. You can see my lines are getting a little bit off here. Another thing is you can hit that left bracket and make this smaller and get in there and do some really fine details. Now, we are not too concerned with this house because this is not the house that we are trying to sell. And if we zoom all the way out, that looks pretty good. You can't even really tell that that is has been photoshopped. So I think I'd be pretty happy with that. All of our focus is on this house here, and nobody's going to pay any attention to that. So what we're going to do is we're going to hit Control S. That will save it out and back into Lightroom, and you can see this is the before and this is the after. Before, after. I'm pretty happy with that. So I'm going to go to this before image. I'm going to right click. I'm going to remove the photo and remove it from Lightroom. We'll do the same editing to here, but I'm not going to take you through that because this is just in the essence of time. Oh, look up here. There was a bird or something flying by as we were taking that picture. So we do have, similar to the spot healing brush here in Photoshop, I can just click this spot removal tool, make it smaller to match the size of the infraction in the image, click over that, and it's going to choose a spot that looks similar. If that spot's not good enough for you, because sometimes it'll go over to something like this and you'll see some weird anomaly appear, you can drag it to where it looks best for you. And just click it again and those circles disappear and you can see everything. And that's gone. So we'll hit File. We've got all of these chosen. We're going to export. This time when we export, I want to click on this, make sure I copy the address. I'm going to go to Delivery, click again, hit Control V, paste that address in there, and this is going to put this in our final folder. So we have 5 files going to the final folder as a JPEG, and they're named exterior. Here we go, export. Those should not take long. There we are, and they're exported. We'll go to the library, and again, hit delete and remove from Lightroom. Now we go through this process for the interiors. So I'll click on import. Oh, here we go. Now I'll change the caret from exterior, close that out, hit interior, click on Photomatix results, and bring all of our interior images in, which means we need to go to interior export on our user presets and import that. This will bring our images up. It always chooses the first image. I like to hit Control A so that all of the images are chosen. Move to my develop module. And the interior preset has already been added. As you can see, the exposure has been brightened by half a stop. The highlights have been brightened by 14. Shadows have been pulled out. Here's what the shadows do. See how it pulls those shadows out of there? That one says 39. I forgot what the number was. Yeah, 39. So as we go down, we can see the clarity has been improved by 12 and dehaze by 9. Dehaze actually makes it a little bit darker, but I like to have some of the shadows pumped back into the corners around here because it makes the image feel more real. If it doesn't have those shadows in it, click off that dehaze again, then everything feels flat and in your face. There's no depth to it. So I bring that dehaze up to about 9. It just puts some texture in these corners, and I'm pretty happy with how this image turned out. Like I said, this was not the most beautiful house we've ever shot, but this is one of our bread and butter houses. These are the kind of houses that we get the most of. So I'm going to go through here. I'm going to hit vertical. That looks good. I'm checking the whole image, see if there's any spots from the lens or anything on there. Hit vertical, hit the arrow button. This picture is not as bright as the other images are, so I'll come back up here to exposure. I'll just bring it up a couple, check it with my last image. That's pretty close. Maybe if I pull out some more shadows a little or bring up the highlights a little, it will match that image better. Now I think it's too bright. Bring those highlights back down. There we go. Make sure it's vertical. Go through all of these, and you saw how precise we were according to the camera using that geared head to make sure that our verticals were just right, but they're never perfect, so we fix them in post. This room was just a dark room anyway. There's no lights in here, so I'll leave it a little bit darker like that. The kitchen was well lit. You could see on this how I sort of cut out that great big gaping hole that was over there. I didn't remove it in Photoshop. It still exists. I just didn't focus on it. And now you can see it's still there. We could put something in there if the agent wanted us to, and you can see it here. We could crop in a little bit on this to sort of get rid of that, and I think I will, just because that foam down there is really ugly. So there we go, and I feel like that centered it out a little bit better too. Come back down here to vertical. It's already been set. It looks pretty good. It looks pretty even. Go to the next one. Just go through all of the rooms like this. I'm scanning. I'm making sure that there's no anomalies, no ghosting, which happens in HDR photos. And a lot of people talk about window pulls. I like these window pulls. They feel real, especially with this thick leaded glass in here. We can get them darker if that was all we were focused on. But with these types of houses, most of the times all you have to see is like old sheds and neighbors' yards and tacky roofs. So having those window poles being perfectly clear does not help. Look, we got that car that I hid behind the tree before when I was doing the backyard. So go through, make sure these verticals are correct. I did get the toilet in all of those shots. And that's it. That's all of the images. We did 23 interiors. They're all already highlighted, so they are selected. Go to File, go to Export, Desktop, Final. Change exterior to interior. Otherwise, it will overwrite your exterior files. So make sure that says interior. It starts at 1. You have 23 files to export. Click Export. Your edit is done. As soon as those export, and they're going pretty fast. Of course, I say that and everything slows down. All right, so our export is completed. What's next? I can come over here to Library, delete these images because I already have them in the final folder, remove them from Lightroom, and close out Lightroom. The Photoshop is still open, so I'll close out of that as well. And now we have over here our folder that we started for this property, 823 View Street. I'm going to grab the final folder from my desktop, drag it up here, hit Shift, and move it into that folder. So that entire folder will now be placed inside of here. I like to go through and look at all of my images together one last time. So I'll just bring them up here. Click through them, see if there wasn't anything I missed. On a nicer home, I might crop in past this little mud patch here, but that's not going to save this yard. So I'm not bothered with it for this house. Wow. See, you don't even notice that now. Like, we're looking at this. That doesn't even enter. It looks a little funny if you really pixel peep it, but it's good enough for this quick job. We'll have to fix that before delivery and go through and make sure all of these look pretty good. They're consistent. Everything looks even. We talked about the outlets not being covered. That's how they are. That's how the owner left them. So that's how we are going to leave them as well. If the agent asked us to Photoshop outlet covers on, which has never happened, we could do it. That's all of our images. Everything looks pretty good. So we will open up our dashboard. Let's maximize this. Go to View Street. They asked for 25 images. That's what we're delivering. Go to Site Media. Find our final folder. Hit Control A. I'm taking out that one with the signpost and moving everything else into place here. Now, the funny thing about how this system for HD Photo Hub works, it turns out it's kind of cool because you can see the first image I've got is the back of the house, but that's not the first image that I want to show up in the listing. So the first image would be this front of the house, square front on. That's kind of our hero image. So I'll grab that image and drag these down. You can see I'm dragging in 27 images, and I'll move that over and release. And the first image that will pop up is going to be the front of the house instead of those two back images, and it will move those to the end of the the listing, and they'll be down here. The last two are these exteriors. So it works out perfect to feel like you're doing a walkthrough of the home. You've got the front of the house, you've got the front door here, and now you're inside the front door, and then it shows off this living dining space. And then we move into the dining room, into the kitchen, upstairs like that. So it feels like we were walking through the house when really they were a little bit out of order. Now they're all in order, and when we deliver these to the agent, that's what he's going to see, and it's going to be easier for him to upload them to the MLS. Those are the kinds of small things that we like to pay attention to that helps our agents out, makes sure that CSG stands for Customer Satisfaction Guaranteed. So moving forward, we are going to get into doing some drone images, and then we're going to move into videos in some later lessons. But this is the full, complete walkthrough and edit for photography on the house, and I appreciate you guys joining me. God bless.